We'll consider two traits of good leaders in this episode because while important, they really don't need a lot of explanation. Good leaders are both humbly confident and they possess gracious ambition. Let's take a look first at humble confidence. And think about how I stated that. Humble confidence. Confidence is the noun. Humble is the adjective that modifies it. And so our first task is to unpack confidence and then how confidence is shaped by humility. It's crucial that a leader be confident because followers can sense a lack of it, and that is going to undermine trust. There's an unspoken agreement of trust between leader and follower. No one follows a leader who can't be trusted. Sadly, fact is there are lots of untrustworthy leaders that people follow. They've been discredited by consistently poor leadership or some glaring moral failure. And yet some followers disregard all of these disqualifiers and continue to trust them, undeserving as they are. The televangelist scandals of the 1980s and more recent hypocritical political leaders are an example of people no one should follow, but who retain a core of committed supporters. But generally, when trust is broken, people stop following, and rightly so. When a leader is uncertain, tentative, overly cautious, doubtful, it can create those same feelings in those being led. A leader's confidence assures their team that things are, they're okay. It's safe to proceed. But confidence can easily sour into arrogance, especially when there's been some success. Arrogance is the great danger of being successful. Many initially good leaders have been ruined by their success. Good examples of this from the Bible are King Saul, Solomon, and the Babylonian monarch Nebuchadnezzar. I encourage any aspiring leader to study the courses through life that are taken by King Saul and King Solomon. Both started out in a seemingly healthy place and were greatly used by God, but they began to think their success was the product of their own ingenuity and effort rather than a gift and a blessing from God. As their egos soared, their effectiveness as leaders waned. Eventually, their careers were shipwrecked on the rocks of their pride. Good leaders are confidently rooted to their utter dependence on God. They can do all things through Christ who strengthens them, but nothing without. Well, that's not quite right. They've learned from experience that worse than being unable to do anything without Christ, anything they do leads to disaster. Years ago, I learned that it wasn't true that I could do nothing without Christ. I can do a lot of damage. And isn't this the story that recent history has made abundantly clear? The damage done by people with power who use it without regard to God. So a leader needs to be confident to inspire trust, which is integral to the leader-follower compact. But the good leader's confidence is shaped by a healthy dose of humility. At first blush, humility and confidence seem to be opposites, but they don't need to be. It all depends on what you're confident of. In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, we read, quote, "I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith," unquote. Biblical humility is not putting yourself down. It's thinking of yourself rightly, as you really are. It's having a clear-headed, biblically consistent understanding of who and what you really are. And that, my friend, is the very essence of the Christian life. Discovering who we are in Christ is the great key, the most important pursuit of your life. When you know who you are in Christ, it unlocks the path to every other relationship, to God, to yourself, to others, and to the wider world. That's why the Bible spends so much time on this subject, telling us what it means to be the people of God. What the Bible means by humility isn't to think of ourselves as scum, but to think honestly, forthrightly, accurately about who we really are. That obviously is free of the soul-inebriating effects of pride, something Satan and the world system are specifically engineered to incite and inspire. I encourage you to feed confidence by thinking deeply on who and what you are in Christ, and then nurture humility by taking communion often, remembering what it costs to make you who you are in Christ. Good leaders are also ambitious, but their ambition has been, sanded down and smoothed by grace. This trait of gracious ambition combines a couple of traits that we've already looked at. Those being that good leaders have vision and the trait that we just looked at. They are also humbly confident. Mixing those together produces a drive in a leader that keeps him or her in their lane, the one that God has assigned them. The word ambition has a negative connotation for many. An overweening ambition to promote self is often the motive of the villain in movies and novels. It was Lucifer's unbridled ambition that turned him into Satan. But ambition doesn't have to be evil. It can be for good. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, Paul says the desire to be an elder is a good ambition. All good leaders possess drive. They're convinced that their vision is worth pursuing and are determined to go after it. That drive is what propels them through hardship and challenge and difficulty. It keeps them focused and intentional. But the ambition of a good leader isn't for personal advancement. Self isn't the bottom line. God's glory and the good of others is the goal. The fallen and dangerous kind of ambition tramples rules and principles. It turns vice into virtue and virtue into vice and justifies injustice. That's what we see in the selfishly ambitious. In pursuit of their goal, they compromise character in a classic the end justifies the means mentality. They end up using people to advance themselves, which of course is the very opposite of a level 5 great leader. His or her success is people. The good leader understands and lives by the principle stated by Jesus that it is better to give than to receive. So be ambitious. You need that drive to carry you through inevitable obstacles and, for sure, challenges. But keep a constant watch on that ambition, that it doesn't sour into merely the success of self-promotion. Success is not how high you climb, it's how many people you take with you. The true victor is not the person alone on the peak, it's the one surrounded by a host of others all standing there because he's led them there. The good leader is not the one who can say, "Look what I've done." It's the one who says, "Look what we did."